Hey kids, cook real food. Katie Kimball here. Welcome to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we connect parents who really want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information they need. And I'm so thrilled to invite my friend Sarah Janette here to talk with you today. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So I know Sarah because we're both becoming certified as stress mastery educators. So we have actually hung out in real life, and her heart is for kind of the teen, young adult, young women population, and her stories are so powerful. I knew we had to share her, her information with you guys. So let me read kind of her official bio just to introduce you to Sarah real quick. Sarah's a certified eating psychology counselor, an integrative nutrition health coach, and a functional medicine practitioner. I think Sarah really likes learning. I'm just throwing that in. She started her adult life with a BS in kinesiology, but realized over the years that not only her own healing, but her giving to others needed more complexity. She needed more. And also simplicity, like looking at the whole person, because that's what functional medicine does. Her mission is to provide young women with strategies to master stress, enhance productivity, and better navigate a healthy lifestyle on both high school and college campuses. Love it, Sarah. She is truly the voice of hope in this era of overachievement. And that's what we're going to talk about today, sort of that balance between anxiety and achievement and stress and peace and calm, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe that'll be the title. So again, thank you so much for being here, Sarah. I'm really thrilled to share this message. Yeah. And you really have a heart for young women, teens, and adults, and you want to help them feel in control of their lives, like on a healthy path as early as possible. And I know especially mom, dads too, but every mom out there is like, well, yeah, that's what I want for my teenagers and my young adults too. But what was your own background that kind of gave you this passion and this mission in your high school and college life?
Yeah, so I went to a hyper-competitive, well-known, prestigious New England prep school, and it was really the first time in my academic career when I felt like perhaps I just couldn't keep up with my peers. And I think for so much in my early academic career, I excelled academically. I got a lot of praise for that. And so I really learned to self-identify with that accomplishment of getting good grades, being a good student. And I think that in absence of having any other goalposts for creating a semblance of self-identity, I really began to struggle. I went on to college and I decided to go to university abroad. And during that time, my first year there, I developed panic attacks and was diagnosed with generalized anxiety and panic disorder. And that really changed the whole trajectory of my collegiate career. And I think it's from that story and from my early experiences with stress and anxiety that I really decided that I wanted to try to help young women who are struggling with the same.
And being there yourself, I mean, you have such a powerful place from which to speak because it really did impact your life. And I'm so curious, what do you think could have helped you kind of let go of that anxiety? And then I know when we were together, you talked about just the shame you felt, like that this was not okay, this was not an acceptable place to be or feeling to feel. Instead of, what strategies could you have learned way back then that could have helped you let go of that more quickly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, having anxiety and clinical anxiety is very different than just having stress or situational anxiety. So I just want to make sure all of your listeners understand that what we're talking about is having a clinical anxiety diagnosis, and specific to me, it was panic disorder. So I was having panic at times that was not apropos for the situation. And I think one of the challenges with anxiety for anyone who is experiencing it is that anxiety begets anxiety, right? So anxiety is really hyper arousal of the nervous system, but it can cause a whole host of both psychological and physiologic experiences that are really alarming and frightening to people who don't understand why it's happening. And so then you kind of get into a cycle where all of a sudden you're afraid of having the anxiety, and then that anxiety about having the anxiety just perpetuates the cycle. So I think it's really hard to disengage from that without without some assistance and mentorship through that. So first things first, anxiety begets anxiety. I think also at the time I didn't understand that physical health and mental health exist on a continuum. You cannot have one without the other. And during that time in my life, I was not paying attention to my physical health, and I had no appreciation or understanding that that in any way, shape, or form would impact my mental health. And thirdly, I think that when we talk about mental health, especially during the era in which I was diagnosed, which was the 1980s, I don't think that culturally we at that time had a level of understanding or acceptance that we do today. So the good in that is that you and I are able to have conversations about mental health in a way that's educational and empowering, and will hopefully reduce the stigma that's out there. At the time that I received a diagnosis, that was not the case. So I think that during that time, not only did I feel personally stigmatized by that diagnosis, but I also felt a lot of the cultural shame that existed around having a mental health disorder. So I think it was really hard to let go of that shame for a long time because I really embodied it.
And The Body Keeps the Score.
The Body Keeps the Score.
You recommended to me, which I haven't read yet, but I will. And and when we were together in person, like you said unequivocally that you were certain that that shame that you just kind of kept sitting on your chest for so many years caused a health problem. Are you willing to share that story?
Sure. So in the fall of 2017, so not quite a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with idiopathic invasive ductal carcinoma, which is really the most common form of breast cancer that most women get. And I elected to have a bilateral mastectomy, which was certainly my own choice. And then following that, I have been seeing both a conventional and a naturopathic oncologist, as well as a functional medicine doctor, just to go ahead and bring my biochemistry back into balance in my best attempt to prevent recurrence down the road. But the reason you and I were discussing that and why it's really relevant to my story is that because my breast cancer was labeled idiopathic, what that means is that from a conventional medicine perspective, there were no underlying obvious drivers genetically for the cancer to appear. So I did not test positive for BRCA1 or 2, which are about 2 of the 10 common tumor suppressor genes that they test for when women are being diagnosed with breast cancer. So when someone doesn't test positively for those, your breast cancer is labeled idiopathic. And it's really funny, when I was preparing for our conversation, I thought, I know on the surface what idiopathic means, but I really wanted to go into the background of it. And I'm just going to read right here because I have it in my notes. But the Latin origin for idiopathic means of unknown origin, but it also means coming from one's own suffering. And I thought that was so apropos for the conversation that you and I had, because I truly believe that my primary driver for my cancer was the fact that I had chronic anxiety and that I really had not developed very good tools for mitigating and mastering my stress throughout my life.
So, I mean, it's so powerful and so frightening. Just such a terrifying time. And then to think like, this is me. But looking back now, what you want to do for other young women is like, let's get some strategies in place before the diagnosis of anxiety, before chronic disease, because there are ways, there are techniques that we can use to decrease just our regular run-of-the-mill everyday anxiety so that it doesn't snowball up.
And I just want to say, I don't want to frighten anybody and have anyone thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out, I'm going to get breast cancer or any other disease, because stress is one component of an entire compendium of components that go into creating an environment where a disease can present itself. And I certainly had other mitigating factors, so I do not want to frighten anybody. However, I do want to stress, all pun intended, that stress is the number one underlying precursor for most of the diseases that we see in our westernized nation. And most of those are really lifestyle diseases, those diseases that we live our way into by virtue of the way we eat and drink, what we think, how we perceive, what belief systems we have. So those are things that we all have a lot of control over. So as scary as it can seem that stress contributes to disease, I also want to give people the message that we absolutely have a way of managing our relationship to stress and having it work for us and not against us, which is a lot of what you and I are learning currently.
Yes, and thank you for that. And it's true,
Yeah,
really here at the Healthy Parenting Connector, like my job is sort of to smash existing belief systems and open up
exactly.
people's minds to thinking, you know what, this is important. Food is important. Stress is important. Lifestyle is important. If we have this bucket that is our health and stress is poking holes in that bucket, no matter how much wonderful food and exercise we put in, if
Right,
it's leaking out, like literally leaking out our stress holes, then our quality of health is going down. And so, yes, we don't want to be
right.
scared because like you said, it's empowering to know that like that is within our control, and stress
Hmm.
doesn't have to be. I love this from our classes. Stress isn't what happens to you. It's actually how you respond to it. So a stressful situation can impact someone's physiology very differently in two different people who have, different strategies for stress response.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
yeah. So we'll talk, like we kind of have to like finish talking about the problem before we can talk about the solution, although
All
we got to
right.
bring this message of hope in between here. And you talked about your high school experience and how that started to kind of make you feel less and less and more anxious and
Sure.
more anxious. And we see in our world today this really high achievement mindset has a massive impact on our young people, especially I think especially young women, and I think you agree. Um, but parents, we just want what's best for them, right? We just want them to be successful in life. But how do we balance that? Like what can be harmful about this like really high achieving mindset?
So, okay, so first of all, fostering an environment where young people can set goals for themselves that are in alignment with their purpose and their passion and their inherent drive for accomplishment is entirely separate than asking them to live in an environment, in our cultural environment, where we have an overemphasis on excessive achievement or extreme acts of beauty or athleticism or academia. So those are two very different concepts, and I want to be completely clear about that because promoting an environment for healthy striving is entirely different than asking a young person, which I think we are doing today,
Mm-hmm.
to excel in an arena of hyper competitiveness and overachievement. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually believe that those standards that we're enforcing upon our young people are creating a culture of comparisonitis, that I like to phrase
Yeah.
it, that's actually undermining so much of the stress and anxiety that we're seeing in both high school and college campuses. And we know statistically that anxiety is the number one challenge on college campuses that's affecting students today.
I mean, I totally believe that. And to really simplify what you just said, we're talking about we want to foster the internal motivation and protect from the external pressures, right? For our children.
Exactly. But if you think
Basically.
about it, historically, we don't teach them that because what we teach as a society is that we're measuring their actions by external societal standards that we set up for them. We say that we are going to measure their worth during their academic careers based on the grades they get, the schools that they get into, the athletic teams that they get, elected to, whether or not they're class president, whether or not they get into a prestigious university, when we know statistically from the research that those individual metrics that we judge our students and assess their capabilities by actually do not speak to their long-term success in their professional careers or their professional lives outside of these school years.
Mm.
So I think that we have some work to do in order to set our young people up for success, because I think what's happening is that it comes from a good place. It's well-intentioned.
Yeah.
We love them and we want them to succeed,
Yeah.
but we have to know that by putting them in environments where we celebrate overachievement or hyperachievement, that we are asking them to inadvertently lessen and loosen the boundaries they have around their own mental and physical well-being in pursuit of those goals that we or they themselves have set for themselves. So I think that part of the work that I do is trying to help young people find that balance and understand that you can strive for competitive excellence so long as you're also maintaining your boundaries around what's true for you and your health and mental awareness, or your physical and mental health.
Yes. Yeah. So looking at the whole person, thinking about, I mean, it has to be your goal, your passion. We want to be so careful, I think, not to train our kids to do school. That,
Yes.
that's not a successful adult, someone who can take tests and do school. Like you said, it doesn't translate. So there's a lot of, good habits. And, a lot of our audience, Sarah, has kids younger than your target, but that's what is going to prepare our children for high school. Like problems don't necessarily have their inception in high school. So are there some strategies that parents of elementary school girls can put into place to help their girls like be more resilient once they hit high school?
Yeah. So yes. So first of all, I do want to just say that as much as we're talking about stress as being a potential negative, again, that has to do with our own labeling and our own perception around it.
Love it.
I do want to say that it is not unusual or unhealthy for young people to experience degrees of stress or discomfort as they grow, because that's actually what it helps us to grow and force us to
learn from our failures, right? Like we grow
exactly.
as we kind of feel that pain, we figure out how to adjust ourselves and become stronger.
Exactly. We need a degree of stress in order to sort of grow psychologically, physically, biologically. However, I think one of the things that we can do when they're young is foster a true understanding of what good nutrition and what self-nourishment really means. And I think that the best way you can do that, especially with young people who may not need or want to understand sort of the intricacies of biochemistry, is just say to themselves, how is it that I want to feel today? And what is it that I want to accomplish? And what do I need to eat or drink in order to get myself there? Right? So that's one seed that we can start engendering at a very young age. And then I think, so apropos with what you've been doing with your work and what you continue to do is really teaching them about mindfulness and stress mastery as early as possible, so that those skill sets become a default mechanism, so that when they are feeling like they're in a place where they're feeling like they're just under too much pressure or the load is just too intense, that they actually have a skill set and techniques to fall back upon so that they can bring themselves back into a state of balance and feel like, no, it's okay, I've got this. And I also think that we need to teach people that every single one of us is biochemically unique, and that what works for one person may not work for another, and that that's a-okay.
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of we encourage parents all the time to talk around the table about food and how it makes you feel and what goals you want for your life. That's great. Great mindsets to build in little ones.
Yeah.
Now, Sarah, you've also spent a lot of time becoming certified and helping others as an integrative nutrition health coach. And so do you see food playing into like parent-child interactions and some of these mental health goals, like specific foods, or would you just, for young children, just talk about that mindset around food?
Okay, so first and foremost, at this point, I think your audience knows that food is information for the body, right? So we need to have nutrient-dense food to feed our bodies so that we're actually giving our bodies the chemical building blocks we need to foster intercellular communication and to keep us running efficiently. But we also know that food is the building blocks for things like our neurotransmitters, which affect our mood and our cognition, as well as really being the building blocks for cultivating a really healthy microbiome. So that's really the bacterial population that we have inside of our gut. And what we know is that microbiome really plays a role in the bidirectional feedback we have between our bodies and our brains and our minds. So there is no way, shape, or form you can talk about good mental health without talking about the food that we're eating, because it's so pivotal to creating an environment where we actually can have both good physical health and mental health.
I love that. So when we talk about mindfulness around food, it's not just, does it make your stomach hurt or does it give you energy? We can think about our brains too. Does it make you feel focused? Does it make you feel foggy? Does it make you feel hyper or angry or sad? Like, foods can actually do that. And so for children to understand that, I think puts them
Huge.
ahead of a lot of adults, really.
I wish I had that understanding when I was a young person, because I think that the old paradigm was that food is really, it's just calories, it's just energy to burn. And there is some truth to that, right? We do get calories from our food, but that's really not the most important thing that we get from our food.
Definitely. Sarah, this has been so packed with information and stories, and I just love to leave parents with both a message of hope and a practical step, right? Just something that they can do today. It doesn't take too much thought. Busy families out there just want to think, oh, like, we hate to think of our kids falling into, an anxiety trap or heading off to college and not understanding how food impacts us, and you know what I mean? Like, we want our kids out of those statistics. So what's your message of hope and your practical step for our audience?
Oh my gosh, my message of hope. I think that this is what I truly believe, that our bodies inherently know how to heal. We just have to give them the right inputs. And we also need to recognize that we're trinities. We're mind, body, and spirit. And that if we're having a challenge, whether it's a physical health challenge or a mental health challenge, we need to recognize that the best way we can support our system is by looking at those three facets of who we are, our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health, and address each of those facets so that we're creating a comprehensive environment for healing to occur. That's number one.
Beautiful.
From a practical standpoint, oh gosh, I think this is a tip that we can all benefit from, but we know from the realm of eating psychology that we best digest, assimilate, and absorb our nutrients if we are eating in a state of physiologic relaxation, right? So that means that we've activated the parasympathetic nervous system. And so my tip for parents is, number one, bring your family together for a meal, because that fosters love and connection, which we need. Number two, I think you can really model mindfulness by either practicing a prayer or dropping into 3 or 4 deep breaths, or enjoying a moment of gratitude for the meal that you're about to have, because any one of those 3 will actually drop your body into parasympathetic nervous system dominance, which is the state that we want to be in when we're getting ready to eat a meal. So really we want to relax our way into that digestion. But I think that that's something that we don't really do so much in our society today. So again, this is where I give kudos to you and everything that you're teaching, because we are not designed to eat on the run. We're not designed to eat while we're looking at a computer or, typing into a cell phone. Our bodies need to taste and see and touch the food that we're eating in order for it to even know that we're having the experience of eating a meal.
That is perfect. It's so practical, so easy, and yet so difficult for busy families who are used to eating on the run, and even for moms who, even if we're eating around the table, generally the mom is the one standing up. I'm the one standing up, running to the kitchen, still chopping stuff, pouring drinks and this and that. And so part of what we do at Kids Cook Real Food is to share the load so that everyone can serve and get to the table, so that mom can actually sit down. But even though I know this in my head, I still have to Katie, sit down. It's so
well, I'll leave
difficult.
you with one last little tidbit. Everything that we've been discussing really comes under the umbrella of what's called the cephalic phase of digestion. And that affects up to 60% of your digestive capacity. So even think about it, if you have little ones, or even for yourself, if you're having any degree of digestive upset, think about the fact that you are conscious about the meal that you're preparing, the fact that you're tasting and smelling and touching and interacting with those foods as you're preparing them, is getting your body ready for that state of digestion. And that if we don't do that, and if we are not consciously involved in that practice of eating, we are offsetting our digestive capacity by up to 50%. That is a huge statistic.
That's
and
huge.
That means that, yep.
I've just decided now I'm going to, when I'm rushing around, I'm going to picture my plate and half of it going into the trash. I'll be like, no, that's too much work.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
We can't waste 50% of our hard work and our money to buy the food because our body isn't ready for it and isn't digesting it.
Right. So you could be eating the best food on the planet, the best well-cooked meal, but if your body cannot digest and assimilate that, it actually doesn't matter. Right? So it's not just about what you're eating, but it's about what your body is able to do with what you're eating. And that's the real secret behind nutrition that many people don't know. So
and that's
crucially important.
It connects us right back to that stress. It's not always about what happens to you. It's about the capacity you've built to deal with that. And so it's, what we do, our habits are so important, rather than going to the doctor to figure out why you have a tummy ache or popping a pill to deal with it. Go from the front end, right? What can we do to use our bodies the way they're intended? Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're so welcome.
Super informative interview. I know parents will just be blessed by this. And hopefully we can, bit by bit continue to change the way busy families eat dinner. You can still be a busy family and eat a relaxed dinner if you're really intentional about it. And that's definitely one of our challenges today. And again, the dinner table connects people together too, which can help reduce anxiety, which is awesome.
Yep. And the behaviors that we do now set them up for their behaviors later in life. So that's really what we're trying to do, is just instill positive behaviors at a young age so that they don't feel like work later in life. It just feels like second nature.
Yes, it's never too late, but the earlier the better, for sure. Thank you so much, Sarah.
You're so welcome.
The Healthy Parenting Connector will be back next week with more experts connecting you with the information you need to raise those kids as healthy as you can. We want those healthy, independent adults out there who are confident, competent, and not anxious, able to deal with their stress. We'll see you next week.